The first shot doesn't echo. It thuds, swallowed by hospital walls built to keep panic quiet. In the admitting corridor, phones start ringing all at once, call lights blooming like small red fires. A stretcher cart rolls unattended, drifting until it kisses a door and stops. At the front desk, a clerk in plain scrubs doesn't flinch. She looks up once, listens not to the yelling but to the rhythm beneath it. A man in tactical gear pushes through the double doors, eyes hard, moving like he's trained for worse than this. His patch reads Ranger. He scans her, dismisses her in a glance, and steps past. Then she reaches under the counter, types a short code with steady fingers. No hesitation, no shaking, and somewhere deep in the building, heavy locks cycle. Steel barriers slide into place. A whole wing seals shut. The ranger turns back too late, realizing the clerk just made a decision that will decide who lives. And he has no idea who she really is. The hospital at night sounded different. Not quieter, just flatter. Every noise was absorbed by walls designed to keep panic from traveling too far. The hum of fluorescent lights, the distant beeping of monitors, wheels on linoleum slowed by tired hands. At the admissions desk, the woman sat straight-backed on a stool that had lost its padding years ago. Her name badge read admissions clerk. No title beyond that, no rank. Just a role most people passed without seeing. She worked the night shift because nights were predictable. Fewer administrators, fewer explanations. People arrived broken or afraid, not impatient. The work was cleaner in its own way. A call light flickered on above the pediatric wing, then another near imaging. She logged both without looking at the screen, fingers moving from habit. Her eyes stayed up, tracking motion in the corridor. A janitor cart rolled past, slower than usual. She noted it, then let it go. At 01:12, the ambulance alert came through, not the public chime, but the secure line. She answered on the first ring. Yes, she said, one word, neutral. She listened, asked no questions. When the line went dead, she didn't move for a full second. Then she reached under the desk and slid a thin binder closer. No labels on the spine. She opened it to a page already creased. The transfer would arrive in 12 minutes. Security started to wake up after that. Radios crackled. A pair of guards appeared near the elevators, standing straighter than they had an hour ago. Someone from administration called down, voice tight, asking if everything was ready. It will be, she replied, and hung up before the man could fill the silence. A nurse rushed past, ponytail loose, shoes squeaking. Are we diverting? She asked, breathless. Not yet, the clerk said. Use north corridors only, imaging stays clear. The nurse nodded without thinking about why she trusted the instruction. She just moved. The desk phone rang again, this time an outside number. The clerk let it ring twice before answering. Admissions. A pause, then a voice, carefully casual. Too careful. I'm looking to confirm access for a late-night transfer. I was told to check with you. Who told you? She asked. Another pause. A name followed, one she recognized, but not in that context. That's not correct, she said. You'll need to speak with internal security. The line disconnected without argument. That bothered her more than if it had. She marked the time in the binder. Down the hall, an elevator chimed. Doors opened. No one stepped out. Doors closed again. The clerk stood up slowly, smoothing the front of her scrubs, and walked 3 steps to her left where a camera feed glowed on a wall-mounted monitor. For half a second, the stairwell camera froze. Then it resumed. She didn't react, just memorized the timestamp. When the ambulance finally arrived, it did so without sirens. Bay doors rolled up. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and antiseptic. The patient was already sedated, wrapped tight, flanked by men who moved with purpose and very little noise. One of them peeled off and headed straight for the desk. He was tall, broad-shouldered, posture unmistakable. His eyes swept the room once, cataloging exits, angles, people. When his gaze passed over her, it did not slow. Transfer for Wing C, he said, already moving. She held up a hand, not blocking, just present. "I'll need your escort codes." He stopped, turned back. Up close, the patch on his shoulder was visible. "Ranger." "Your admissions," he said, not unkindly. "We're cleared." "I still need the codes," she replied. He exhaled through his nose, glanced at the clock. "We don't have time." "You do," she said calmly. "If you don't, we'll lose more later." That earned her a look, not anger, assessment, brief, sharp, and dismissive. He recited the codes. She typed them in. The system accepted two. Rejected the third. She didn't announce it. Instead, she nodded, stepped aside, and watched as his team moved on. She waited until they were out of earshot before opening the binder again and flipping to a different page. Something was wrong. Not dramatic wrong, structural wrong. The kind that only showed up if you knew where the seams were. She closed the binder and returned to her stool. The desk went back to being invisible, but the building had already started to listen to her. After the transfer team disappeared down the corridor, the hospital did what it always did. It pretended nothing had changed. Monitors continued their steady rhythm. A cart rattled somewhere near dietary. A television murmured in a waiting room where no one was waiting. From a distance, it looked calm enough to fool anyone who hadn't learned how buildings behaved under stress. The clerk sat back down. She did not rush. Rush was for people who notice things too late. Her screen updated with badge activity from the last 15 minutes. Most of it was routine: security patrols, nurses crossing zones, a respiratory tech moving between floors. She scrolled slowly, eyes catching on a single entry that didn't belong. A badge used twice in two places, less than 30 seconds apart. She highlighted it. Didn't flag it yet. At 01:19, the stairwell camera stuttered again. This time only a quarter second, enough to be blamed on bandwidth, enough to be ignored by anyone who trusted systems more than instincts. She trusted patterns. A guard passed the desk, moving fast now. "You hear anything?" he asked. "No," she said truthfully, "but you should check the south stairwell." "Why?" "Because if someone wanted to avoid attention," she replied, "they wouldn't use the main routes." The guard hesitated, then nodded and changed direction without calling it in. She watched him go, noting the way his shoulders tightened. The phone rang. "Internal line." "Admissions," she answered. "This is facilities," a man said. "We're getting a false alarm from a pressure sensor in Wing C. You want us to reset?" "No," she said. "Leave it active." Silence. "It's probably nothing." "Probably," she agreed. "Leave it." She hung up before he could argue. Behind her, the automatic doors whispered open and closed. Foot traffic had increased, not patients, staff. The kind of movement that happened when people sensed something but didn't yet know what to call it. The ranger came back 5 minutes later. He stopped short this time, eyes sharper, less dismissive. "Who rerouted my secondary access?" "You didn't need it," she said. "We might." "You won't," she replied, still seated. He studied her now, took in the binder, the camera monitor. The way her hands rested, not idle, not fidgeting. "What do you know?" he asked. "I know your third code didn't validate," she said. "And I know someone tried to confirm access using a name they shouldn't have had." "That doesn't mean." "It means you're not the only ones moving tonight." He glanced down the hall, thumb brushing the edge of his radio. "You should report this." "I am," she said, continuously. "To who?" She looked up at him, not challenging, just direct. "The building." That earned a brief frown. He turned away, clearly unconvinced, but his pace had changed. He was listening now, even if he didn't admit it. At 01:27, the first real mistake happened. A junior nurse swiped into a supply room she didn't usually use. The system logged it. Nothing alarming, except the door never opened. The swipe registered, but the latch didn't disengage. That meant someone else had control. The clerk stood. She walked to the desk phone and picked it up. "Security," she said when it connected. "Lock your radios to channel 4, quiet mode." A pause. "Why?" "Because if someone is listening," she said, "you don't want to help them." She replaced the handset and moved to the camera monitor. The stairwell feed was clean now. too clean, no motion, no noise, as if the space had emptied itself deliberately. That's when the overhead announcement began and cut out mid-sentence. Attention, static, silence. Every head in the corridor turned upward. The clerk reached under the desk and pulled out a slim keypad normally concealed behind a maintenance panel. She didn't touch it yet. She waited. A sharp sound echoed from somewhere distant. Not loud, not close, but unmistakable. A single gunshot. Screams followed seconds later, blooming down a different wing. Chaos tried to rush the desk all at once. Nurses ran. A doctor shouted for security. Someone dropped a tray, metal clattering too loudly. The clerk didn't raise her voice. She pointed. "You wheel that patient back. You stay put, close that door." People obeyed without realizing they were doing it. The ranger appeared again, this time moving fast, hand on his weapon. "Where?" he demanded. "Not here," she said. "Yet." "How do you know?" "Because if it were here," she replied, "we'd already be dead." That stopped him. She finally touched the keypad, not to activate it, just to wake it up. Lights flickered along the corridor, subtle, almost invisible. Systems shifting, doors preparing to listen. The crisis hadn't fully arrived yet, but it was close, and the hospital was no longer neutral. The noise didn't spread evenly. It never did. The scream that followed, the gunshot stayed trapped in its wing, bouncing between reinforced walls, never quite reaching the admissions desk. What arrived instead was pressure, people moving faster, voices sharper, decisions made without full information. The clerk watched it all from behind the desk. The transfer team had halted near the secured corridor leading to Wing C. The patient remained motionless on the gurney, chest rising under the steady rhythm of sedation. Two rangers stood on either side now, weapons low but ready, eyes no longer bored. The ranger who had spoken to her earlier came back again, radio pressed to his shoulder. "We're moving the patient early," he said. "We're rerouting through East Access." "No," she replied. He turned sharply. "That wasn't a request." She leaned forward slightly, not aggressive, just present. "East Access crosses pediatric recovery. You'll bottleneck in a glass corridor with no hard cover. We can secure." "You won't," she said, "because whoever fired that shot wasn't improvising. They're steering you." That word landed differently. He hesitated just long enough for her to continue. "You were scheduled to move at 0134, she said. "Your request came at 0128, 6 minutes early. Threat changed." "No," she replied. "Instructions did." His jaw tightened. "You don't have the full picture." "I have the relevant one," she said, and tapped her screen. A new request had appeared, an override authorization stamped with a clearance level just below federal emergency access. It was clean, almost too clean. She read it once, then again. The language was wrong, not the words, the order of them. A procedural phrasing used by someone who had studied policy but never lived inside it. "This authorization is false," she said quietly. "That clearance comes from someone copying a template," she interrupted. "Not someone issuing commands under stress." The ranger exhaled slowly, glancing down the corridor where shouting was growing closer. "If you're wrong, if I'm wrong," she said, "you lose time. If I'm right, you lose the patient." That reframed the risk. Another ranger stepped closer, voice low. "Sir, we're getting conflicting chatter. Someone's feeding us partials." The first ranger didn't look away from her. Who would do that? She didn't answer. Not because she didn't know, but because names didn't matter yet. Movement did. She reached for the binder again, flipping to the page marked with a small dot in the corner. No title, just diagrams, zones, arrows. "This corridor," she said, pointing. "You hold here, 2 men only. Everyone else pulls back 10 meters. "That leaves us exposed," he said. "It leaves you invisible," she replied. "They're counting on you to push." A crash echoed from deeper inside the building. Not gunfire, something heavier, metal against concrete, time compressed. A nurse ran up, breath ragged. "They're saying we need to clear Wing C now." Someone called it in. "Who?" the clerk asked. I don't know, it came through admin." "That channel is compromised," the clerk said. "Go back, lock the doors behind you." The nurse didn't question it. The ranger finally keyed his radio. "Hold positions, no reroute." A voice crackled back, frustrated. "Command says." "I said hold," he repeated. The clerk watched his posture shift. Not surrender, adjustment. The intruder hadn't reached them yet, but the lie had. She studied the override request one last time, then canceled it with a single keystroke. No alert sounded. No announcement followed. Just a quiet refusal. Somewhere, whoever had sent it would notice. That was the point. A tremor ran through the floor, not an explosion. A door being forced open several levels away. The ranger's radio erupted with fragments. "Stairwell breach. Can't see. South wing," he turned back to her. "If this goes wrong, it already has," she said. "The question is whether it keeps going." She slid the keypad closer, not activating it yet, just making it visible. "This hospital has containment protocols older than your team," she said. "They're not meant for convenience. They're meant for moments when movement is the threat." He stared at the keypad, then at her hands, steady, no tremor, no rush. "You're not just admissions," he said. She didn't respond. Instead, she looked at the camera feed as a shadow crossed a threshold it should not have crossed. "Your window is closing," she said quietly. The ranger made a decision. "Do it," he said. She did not move immediately. She waited one beat longer, just long enough to be certain the lie had fully revealed itself. Then her fingers hovered over the keys. Not yet. The first thing the intruder took was the illusion of distance. Until then, the danger had lived on radios and screens, fragmented, abstract, something that could still be managed by spacing and procedure. When the fire door on the south wing slammed open hard enough to shake the lights, that illusion collapsed. The sound carried. Not loudly, cleanly. The clerk felt it through the soles of her shoes before anyone else reacted. Down the corridor, a security officer stumbled backward into view, one hand pressed to his shoulder, blood darkening the fabric between his fingers. He didn't scream. He just looked confused, like a man who hadn't yet accepted what had happened. "Door," the clerk said. A nurse slammed it shut without waiting for clarification. The ranger stepped forward, weapon up now, posture sharp. His team fanned instinctively, forming a partial perimeter, but the geometry was wrong. Too many angles, too much glass. "Contact confirmed," a voice crackled over the radio. "Single hostile moving north." "Single," the clerk repeated quietly. She didn't look at the ranger, she looked at the building. The intruder wasn't running. That was the detail that mattered. Footsteps came in measured intervals, not panicked, not erratic. Whoever it was knew exactly how far sound carried, exactly how much time they had between reactions. That narrowed the possibilities. "Lock imaging," she said. "That'll trap," someone began. "Lock it," she repeated. The doors sealed with a soft hydraulic sigh. The ranger glanced at her. "You're cutting off exits." "I'm shaping them," she said. "They don't want chaos, they want a path." As if to confirm it, a crash echoed from the opposite direction, something thrown deliberately to pull attention away. Two nurses ran toward the sound. "Stop," the clerk said, not loudly but with a firmness that cut through motion. "That's a lure." They froze, eyes wide. Another gunshot rang out closer this time, not aimed. A warning, panic surged. The ranger raised his voice for the first time. "Everyone back, clear the corridor." But panic doesn't listen to volume, it listens to certainty. The clerk stepped out from behind the desk. She didn't run. She walked straight into the open space where everyone could see her. "North corridor only," she said. "Single file, no pushing, wheelchairs first." Her tone was calm, almost flat, and it worked. People moved because the instructions were specific, because they sounded rehearsed, because somewhere deep everyone recognized the cadence of someone who had done this before. The intruder appeared at the far end of the hallway, not fully, just a shoulder. A weapon barrel, enough to confirm presence without offering a target. The ranger's team shifted, ready to engage. "Don't," the clerk said. The ranger snapped his head toward her. We have visual and they have you, she replied. They want you loud and moving. The intruder fired again into the ceiling this time. Tiles exploded. Sprinklers hissed, then fell silent as the system failed to engage, deliberate, controlled. Why aren't the sprinklers on? Someone shouted. Because they disabled the local loop, the clerk said, which means they planned this route. The ranger stared at her. How do you know that? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached the wall-mounted panel near the nurse's station and popped it open with practiced ease. Inside, a row of switches glowed amber. She flipped one. Lights dimmed, not out, just enough to change depth perception. Shadows lengthened, reflections vanished from glass. The intruder paused. That was new. They had expected screaming, running, a surge. They had not expected the building to go quiet. The ranger saw it too, the way the intruder hesitated, recalibrating. Move patients now, the clerk said. You have 40 seconds. How do you know? Because that's how long it takes them to decide if they're still in control. A monitor alarm spiked somewhere behind them, a patient in distress. The clerk turned, assessed, then pointed. Respiratory, go, you help her, don't run. She was everywhere at once without moving fast. The intruder advanced another step, testing. The ranger raised his weapon again. Wait, the clerk said, they're counting rounds. Another shot, another ceiling tile. 3, she murmured. The ranger's eyes flicked to her. They're signaling, she said. They want us to respond. A radio squawked. We've lost South Stairwell. Of course you have, she said. That's where they came in. The building groaned softly as another internal door sealed. The intruder stopped completely now. They were close enough for the ranger to see details, gloves, stance, the way the weapon was held. Professional, disciplined. This wasn't a spree, this was extraction. The clerk finally looked at the keypad in her hand. Not yet. She waited as the intruder leaned just far enough into the light to be seen. Then she pressed a single key. Nothing dramatic happened. No alarms. No sirens. But deep inside the hospital, mechanical systems woke up. Old ones, designed for exactly this kind of moment. The ranger felt it before he understood it, a shift in air pressure, a change in the sound of the building breathing. What did you just do? He asked. I warned it, she said. The intruder stepped back suddenly as if realizing the environment had changed around them. They had arrived, but they were no longer in charge. The hospital did not panic. That was the first thing the intruder noticed, and the first thing that went wrong. They had expected noise to swell, running feet, open channels filled with shouting. Instead, the corridor ahead of them emptied with quiet efficiency, doors closing not in fear but in sequence. Lights dimmed just enough to distort distance. Sound flattened, swallowed by materials designed to absorb trauma. At the center of it all, the admissions desk remained exactly where it had been. The clerk stood beside it now, not behind it. Her hands rested lightly on the surface, fingers relaxed. The keypad was no longer hidden, but she hadn't touched it again. The ranger stepped into her space. You're restricting my movement, he said, voice low and tight. My team is cut off from 2 access points. Yes, she replied, because those access points would have put you where they want you. That's not your call. She met his eyes for the first time fully, not defiant, measured. It is, she said, right now. Another shot cracked the air closer. This one hit a wall-mounted sign, shattering plastic and sending fragments skittering across the floor. The ranger's jaw clenched. I can end this if you let me move. You can escalate it, she said. That's different. He leaned closer. People are bleeding, and fewer will if you stay here. His hand tightened on his weapon, not pointing, just holding. You're asking me to stand down in the middle of an active threat. I'm asking you to let the building do what it was designed to do, she replied, and to trust that I won't trap your people. That's a lot of trust for a clerk. She didn't react to the word. Instead, she reached out and turned the monitor so he could see. Not the intruder, not the injured guard. A schematic, Wing C outlined in amber. Surrounding corridors shifting from green to yellow as internal locks prepared to engage. ventilation pathways rerouting airflow, pressure differentials equalizing. This facility was expanded 15 years ago, she said. After a chemical incident 3 states away, the upgrades weren't public. Most staff don't even know they exist. He stared at the screen. You're preparing a containment, he said. Yes. That wing has patients who can't be moved, and doors that can't be forced quickly, she said, and sightlines that favor defenders who don't advance. The intruder fired again, 2 shots this time, closer still, a warning turning into impatience. They're probing, the ranger said. They're frustrated, she corrected. That's new. A voice came over his radio. Sir, we're boxed in near radiology. We're taking pressure. The ranger looked back at her. If I lose a man, you won't, she said. But you might lose time, and that's the trade. He stared at her, really stared now, not at her badge, at her posture, the way she stood just off-center, giving herself space without signaling threat, the way her breathing never changed, even as the air thickened with tension. You're not reacting, he said. I already reacted, she replied. You're seeing the result. Another door sealed somewhere behind them with a dull, final sound. The intruder shouted for the first time. Not words, just a sharp, angry bark meant to provoke response. The ranger flinched despite himself. She didn't. They want us loud, she said. They want chaos to cover movement. And what do you want? He asked. I want them contained, she said. And alive if possible. He blinked. Alive. They didn't come here to die, a scream echoed from farther down the hall, one of fear, not pain, a patient. The ranger turned instinctively toward the sound. Wait, she said. I can't. If you move now, she said calmly, you give them a corridor. He froze, torn between instinct and something else, logic maybe, or the recognition that nothing about this night was unfolding the way it should. She reached for the keypad again. This is the last point where choice exists, she said. After this, the wing seals, you'll be outside it. And them? Inside, she replied, with no clear exits. And the patients. She held his gaze, with me. That landed. You're putting yourself in there, he said slowly. Yes. Unarmed. Yes, that's reckless. No, she said, it's calculated. He searched her face for doubt, found none. You do this, he said, and I can't pull you out fast. I know, she replied, another crash. The intruder was closer now, close enough that the ranger could hear breathing between shots. Time collapsed to a narrow edge. The ranger made his decision. Seal it, he said. She nodded once. No triumph, no relief, just confirmation. Her fingers moved, precise, economical. She keyed in the full sequence. Deep within the hospital, something old and heavy shifted. The lights along Wing C changed color. Steel barriers slid into place. The corridor doors locked with a sound that carried weight. The intruder fired once more, then stopped. Trapped. The ranger exhaled, slow and controlled. What happens now? He asked. She watched the monitor as the sealed wing finalized its status. Now, she said, we see who understands patience. The sound of the locks finishing their cycle moved through the hospital like a low tide pulling back. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was final. Wing C shifted from amber to red on the schematic, its perimeter lines thickening as the system confirmed isolation. Pressure stabilized. Airflow rerouted. Every door within the wing acknowledged a single authority and stopped listening to everything else. The ranger felt it in his chest, an instinctive recognition that control had changed hands. Inside the sealed wing, the noise dropped away. Patients lay where they were, eyes wide, oxygen masks fogging faintly. A nurse stood frozen beside a medication cart, knuckles white around the handle. Somewhere deeper inside, something scraped against a wall, slow, deliberate. The intruder. The clerk stepped fully past the threshold as the final barrier slid shut behind her. The sound echoed down the corridor, then faded. She didn't rush. She turned first to the nurse. Name. Laura, the woman said, voice shaking. Laura, the clerk replied, I need you steady. We're going to work through this one thing at a time. There's a man, I know, she said. He's not moving fast. She moved to the nearest patient, checked the monitor, adjusted the oxygen flow by a fraction. Her hands were precise, familiar. The work anchored the space. Another sound closer now, a footstep, measured. The intruder was testing. "Doors stay closed," the clerk said softly. "No shouting, no running." Laura swallowed and nodded. The intruder spoke then, calm, almost conversational. "You didn't need to do this." The clerk didn't respond. She stepped to the wall panel and pressed a control that killed overhead paging inside the wing. Silence deepened. Whatever the intruder wanted to say, he'd have to come closer. That was the point. The ranger watched from the other side of the barrier, jaw tight, eyes tracking camera feeds that now showed only partial angles. The sealed wing had blind spots by design. "She's alone in there," one of his men said. "No," the ranger replied. "She's not." Inside, the clerk listened, not just to sound but to timing. The intruder moved like someone trained to clear rooms, but he hesitated at doorways. He didn't rush corners, he was careful. Careful meant options. She stepped into an alcove and waited. When the intruder finally appeared fully in the corridor, weapon raised but not firing, she was already positioned to be seen. Not hiding, not charging, standing. "You planned this badly," he said. "You sealed yourself in." "I sealed you out," she replied. "From everyone else." His eyes flicked past her, taking in the patience, the narrowness of the space. "You think I won't go through you. I think you don't need to," she said. He studied her, not the badge, the stance, the distance she kept. The way her hands stayed visible without being empty of purpose. "You're not afraid," he said. "I am," she replied. "That's why I'm careful." Behind her, a monitor alarm spiked, oxygen pressure dropping in one room. The clerk didn't break eye contact. She reached back blindly, flipped a valve she had already memorized. The alarm settled. The intruder noticed. "That was practiced," he said. "Yes," she replied. He shifted his weight, adjusting his grip. "You don't belong here." She nodded once. "Neither do you." For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Outside the wing, the ranger watched the feed closely. No shouting, no struggle. Just two figures facing each other, tension coiled tight between them. "She's buying time," one of his men said. "Yes," the ranger replied, "and she's winning it." Inside, the clerk took a slow step forward, not aggressive, controlled. "You came for one person," she said. "You won't get them. You don't know who I answer to." "I don't need to," she replied. "I know what you're afraid of." That stopped him. "You're afraid of waiting," she continued. "Of being stuck with consequences. You need movement to stay ahead of them." He said nothing. She gestured subtly to the corridor behind him. "This wing doesn't reward movement, it rewards patience." Another monitor beeped, heart rate elevated, a patient reacting to stress. The clerk turned away from the intruder for half a second to calm the patient, voice low, steady. When she turned back, the intruder hadn't moved. That told her everything. "You can sit," she said, "or you can stand, but you won't advance." Minutes passed, not many, enough. Outside, additional units arrived. Quietly, methodically. The ranger coordinated without raising his voice, aligning his people to the building's new geometry instead of fighting it. Inside, the intruder lowered his weapon a fraction. The clerk noticed. She did not comment. Eventually, he spoke again. "You're going to cost me everything." She met his eyes. "You already did that yourself." When he finally set the weapon on the floor, the sound was barely audible. The clerk didn't move until his hands were flat on the wall. Only then did she exhale. Not relief, release. The moment the weapon touched the floor, the tension did not vanish. It changed shape. The intruder's hands were on the wall now, fingers spread, posture compliant, but compliance was not surrender. It was a calculation paused, not abandoned. The clerk understood that. She did not approach him yet. She turned instead to the patients. Containment always had a cost. You never felt it immediately. It arrived in quieter ways: oxygen levels, heart rhythms, people who could not be moved but still needed reassurance. "Laura," she said softly, "I need you with me." The nurse stepped forward, shaking but focused. "What do you need?" "Room 12, the clerk said. "Check the line, slow your movements." Laura nodded and went. The intruder watched them work, eyes tracking details he couldn't help noticing. The clerk never turned her back fully. She angled herself so reflection, sound, and space all stayed readable. Outside the sealed wing, the ranger waited. Protocol demanded he push for entry now. A suspect disarmed meant advantage. Speed meant control. He did neither. "She's still inside," one of his men said. "Yes," the ranger replied. "Because pulling her out too early would break what she's built." The feed showed the intruder shifting slightly, testing the limits without moving his hands. Inside, the clerk felt the vibration through the floor before she heard it, a door mechanism cycling on a delay. The wing systems were recalculating, compensating for human presence where they had expected empty space. She crossed to the wall panel and adjusted the airflow manually, reducing the faint whistle that had begun to rise. The building settled again. "You're good at this," the intruder said. She didn't answer. "You didn't even ask my name." "I don't need it," she replied. "I need you still." Silence followed, heavy, pressurized. Laura returned. "The patient's stabilizing," she whispered. "Good," the clerk said. "Stay with them." The intruder spoke again, quieter now. "You know they won't thank you." "That's fine," she replied. "They'll write reports," he continued. "They'll question your authority. Yes. They'll ask why a clerk was making decisions that belonged to command." She turned to face him fully for the first time since he disarmed. Her expression did not change. "They'll ask," she said, "and I'll answer only what's required." He studied her with something like recognition. "You've done this before." She did not confirm it. Outside, the ranger received a quiet update through his earpiece. Federal oversight was en route. Jurisdiction lines were being drawn carefully, deliberately. The night was narrowing toward its end. Inside the wing, a patient began to cry, softly, confused, overwhelmed by the sudden stillness after fear. The clerk knelt beside the bed, placed a hand on the rail. "You're safe," she said. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to be believed. The intruder looked away. That was the moment the ranger saw the shift on the monitor, not in posture, in intent. "He's done," the ranger said quietly. "How can you tell?" one of his men asked. "He stopped trying to win," the ranger replied. "Now he's waiting to be finished." The final step came without ceremony. A controlled unlock sequence engaged, not the full wing, just a narrow corridor leading to the intruder's position. Doors opened in stages, limiting movement, guiding instead of forcing. The ranger entered first, weapon low but ready. The intruder did not resist. As cuffs were applied, his gaze flicked once more to the clerk. "They were wrong about you," he said. She met his eyes briefly. "They usually are," she replied. He was led away without further words. The wing exhaled, lights brightened by a fraction. Systems returned to baseline. The building released control slowly, like a hand unclenching after strain. The clerk leaned against the wall for a moment, not from exhaustion, but to feel the weight leave her bones. The ranger approached the barrier, stopping short of crossing fully into her space. "You should have told me who you were," he said. She shook her head. "Then you'd have had to act differently." He considered that. "You put yourself in danger." "Yes, for people who will never know." "Yes." A beat passed. "You paid the cost," he said finally. She nodded once. "Then I won't add to it." He turned away, already issuing quiet orders, already closing the night down. The clerk returned to the admissions desk as the wing reopened in controlled stages. She sat on the worn stool, smoothed her scrubs, and logged the final entry of the shift. Outside, dawn pressed faintly against the windows. Inside, the desk became invisible again. And that was how she preferred it. The wing did not reopen all at once. That was deliberate. Containment ended the same way it began, by degrees. Doors unlocked in a sequence that forced patience, corridors revealing themselves one segment at a time. Anyone who tried to rush would find themselves stopped by architecture that refused to cooperate. The clerk watched the process from the inside. She had repositioned herself near the central nurse's station, where sightlines crossed and sound carried cleanly. The patients were calmer now. Sedation levels were steady. The immediate danger had passed, but this was the part where mistakes happened. After action, after relief. That was when authority tested itself. The ranger re-entered the wing with two men, their weapons holstered, posture controlled. He stopped a respectful distance away. He did not announce himself. "Federal oversight is 2 minutes out," he said quietly. "They'll want statements." "Yes," she replied. "They'll ask why the wing sealed without their authorization." "Yes, they'll ask who gave the command." She looked at the monitor, checking one last patient readout. "They can ask." He studied her face for signs of tension, strain, anything that suggested doubt. There was none. "You understand what this could cost you," he said. "I understood before I typed the code," she replied. A door opened farther down the hall, not one of the controlled ones, an ordinary patient room door. A man stepped out, middle-aged, IV pole rolling beside him, confusion etched across his face. "Am I safe?" he asked. The clerk moved immediately. Not fast, certain. She guided him back inside, adjusted the pole, explained in simple language what had happened without offering detail or drama. "You're safe now," she said again. And this time the words held weight. When she returned, the ranger was still there. "That," he said quietly, "is why this worked." She didn't respond. Footsteps approached, measured, confident. Two men in plain clothes entered the wing, badges clipped at waist height, expressions neutral. They did not look at the patients first. They looked at the sealed door indicators. One of them addressed the ranger. "Who initiated containment?" The ranger didn't answer immediately. He looked at the clerk. She met his gaze, not expectant, not resistant, simply present. "I authorized it," the ranger said finally, "based on threat assessment." The man raised an eyebrow. "Your report will need to reflect." "It will reflect exactly what happened," the ranger replied. The man turned to the clerk then. "Name?" She gave it. "Role?" "Admissions," she said. The man paused, just a fraction too long. "And access to restricted protocols." She nodded. "As required." "Required by whom?" She met his eyes. "By the building." Silence stretched. The man looked at his partner, then back at the ranger. "We'll need to review the system logs." "They're clean," the ranger said, "because the decision was correct." The man studied him now. "That's not how reviews work." "No," the ranger agreed, "but it is how responsibility works." The second man spoke for the first time. There was an intruder with advanced training. No fatalities, minimal injuries, a protected patient secured. "Yes," the ranger said, "because someone understood when not to move." The men took notes, quietly, professionally. They did not ask the clerk anything further. When they left, the wing felt lighter, not relieved, but resolved. The ranger lingered. "You could have stayed silent," he said. "Let me take everything." "I did," she replied. "You spoke." He nodded. "That was intentional." "Yes." Another pause. "You won't be here long," he said, not a question. "No," she replied. "Where will you go?" She glanced back toward the desk, now visible again through reopened corridors. "Where I'm needed." He considered that. "They'll never put this in a citation." "That's fine," she said. He extended his hand, not ceremonially, not for show, just acknowledgement. She shook it once. Firm, brief. The final door unlocked with a soft click. Wing C returned to green. The building settled into its familiar hum. The crisis ended not with applause, not with statements, not with recognition, but with routine reclaiming its space. The clerk walked back to the admissions desk as morning staff began to arrive, their conversations unaware of what the night had carried. She logged out of the system, closed the binder, returned the keypad to its hidden panel, and sat, invisible again. Morning arrived without ceremony. Sunlight filtered through the high windows in thin, pale bands, catching dust in the air and softening edges that had been sharp all night. The hospital changed shifts the way it always did. Handovers, clipped conversations, the sound of fresh shoes on floors worn smooth by repetition. The clerk remained at the admissions desk until her shift officially ended. No one came to debrief her. No one asked for a statement. A supervisor passed once, glanced at the desk, nodded absently, and kept walking. The system showed green. That was all most people needed. She logged out for the final time and stood. The stool creaked softly as she pushed it back into place. She straightened the small stack of forms on the counter, aligned the pen parallel to the edge, and closed the drawer beneath the desk where the binder had been stored. It would be collected later, or it wouldn't. Either way, it was no longer hers to carry. As she turned to leave, the ranger appeared at the end of the corridor. He didn't approach the desk. He stopped several steps short, respecting the boundary she had never asked for but always maintained. "They're calling it a procedural success," he said quietly. No mention of how close it came. "That's normal," she replied. "They reassigned the transfer," he continued. "Patient's already gone." She nodded. "Good." A pause settled between them, not uncomfortable, just complete. "You could have stayed," he said. "Consulted, taught." She shook her head once. That would change the balance. He studied her, understanding now that some people were effective only when unnoticed. "They'll keep the protocol," he said, "but they won't know why it worked." "That's enough," she replied. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document creased, unofficial. He offered it without comment. She glanced at it once, didn't open it. "No," she said gently, "keep it." He nodded, accepting the refusal without offense. "Then this is where it ends," he said. "Yes," she agreed. She walked past him toward the staff exit, footsteps unhurried. No one stopped her. No one watched. The building had already returned to its usual rhythms, absorbing the night as if it had never happened. Outside, the air was cool and clean. Traffic moved in steady lines. The world continued, indifferent. She paused once, just long enough to feel the weight leave her shoulders. Then she adjusted her jacket, blended into the morning crowd, and disappeared. The hospital stood behind her, quiet, intact, unaware of how close it had come. And that was the point.